Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. The show is about to start. Hey guys, what's up? This is Phoebe.
This is Mike.
This is episode 33 of the Mike and Phoebe Show. So now we have a live in-studio guest. This is Katie Keys. Katie is the president of the Perris Valley Historical Museum here. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Phoebe and Mike.
How are you?
Well, I'm good.
Thank you so much for coming in studio today to talk to us.
Okay, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. So now tell me, in the beginning, why was Perris called the San Jacinto Plains?
Well, in the beginning, of course, there was no Perris. And when people, the settlers started coming, the San Jacinto River runs through Perris.
Right.
And, it runs through Nuevo Lakeview, clear to around San Jacinto. It's over by the Saboba Indian Reservation. Actually, it comes that way and comes around. And, they just knew the river was there. And the Native Americans came and used to use the land to feed their sheep and cattle and stuff.
Yes.
The Lewis Indians. And so it was just called the San Jacinto Plains because it was pretty barren, actually. There was hardly any trees or anything. It was just mainly, grass and whatever was growing at the time.
Yeah, it was all farmland at the time, wasn't it?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
it began to be farmland when the settlers came.
Yeah. And it was
Way back in the...
But it was just because of the river, actually. And it still, runs through here,
Mhm.
especially when you have a lot of rain.
Yes.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm not from Perris originally. I just started coming around. This was in 2005 when Mike and I started dating. So
Yeah.
I always thought, Perris, that's an interesting name, interesting spelling. And it's not like Paris, France, but it's Perris, Perris. So, and that's actually someone's last name, Fred Perris, right?
Yes.
So you want to tell me, how did the city of Perris get their name?
Okay, the city of Perris got their name because Fred Perris, who was the chief engineer of the California Southern Railway, which was part of the Santa Fe Railroad, was, going along doing the surveying. He was a surveyor and he laid out several places. In fact, he did survey Temecula.
Oh.
Someone else actually surveyed Perris. The beginning fathers in Perris, that were farmers and whatnot, they wanted a railway depot, in downtown. And at first they had put it in a place called Pinacati, which was about a mile and a half south of Perris, where Perris is now. And it's where the Southern California Railroad is right now, actually, that's built on that land. And in the beginning, they had about 400 people living in the Pinacati area. And they had a boxcar just as their depot.
Wow.
And so they had a lot of land disputes in Pinacati. And so the people up north, up north of Perris, contacted the railroad and asked them if they could build a railroad in, a depot in Perris. And lo and behold, Fred Perris showed up and got the job done. And, there was businessmen from San Bernardino involved, and his son-in-law, Benjamin Franklin Levitt, who had worked with him in his survey crew when he was a young man, had married one of his daughters, and he was an architect at the time.
Oh.
And he designed the Perris Depot, which is just beautiful Victorian depot.
Wow.
So it's a real treasure for Perris. So the town and this Mr. Mack, who is from San Bernardino, and the railroad, they kind of got together and said, we're naming the town Perris after Mr. Perris because he did that beautiful depot for us. And that's how Perris got its name.
And do you remember off the top of your head what year that was? It was like 1800 maybe?
Yeah. Well, the depot was built in 1892. So it had to have been started, in the 1880s.
In the 1880s.
Yeah. The
Wow.
town of Perris was actually mapped out as a township in 1886.
Oh, a township. See, I remember hearing about the word township before.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get into the meaning of township. That's kind of digressing.
Yeah, but it was surveyed at that time and was known as a township, and it didn't become an incorporated city until 1911.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was 112 years.
Yeah, 100.
Yeah, because it's 2023 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was 112 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Paris had a big centennial celebration in 2011. And
Yeah.
our museum did a huge display for 'em out at the fairgrounds.
Talking about the museum, we've done quite a few tours there at the museum there. I really enjoy seeing the history and the artifacts too.
Yes.
All the different things that was used back then. It's one thing to see it in the books, like you brought in your books. It's one thing now to see it online, everything's online, but you don't get to feel the history and the energy.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't touch the artifacts, but just to be in that same room, you feel all the energy and the history behind all the artifacts, the importance behind that. I find that amazing. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really kind of start with the earliest part of the Perris Valley, which was, of course, the Native Americans.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And of course, they had several sites around, and they left a lot of things behind because they like to have their little village by like a water source,
Yes.
Like a little river or spring or whatever. We have a lot of springs that kind of come down off the hills. And we have some beautiful Native American sites in Paris, actually.
Yeah. It's important to recognize our past,
Right.
because it is all about what is Paris about. There's so much history behind that. So it's definitely important to recognize that and to bring to the culture nowadays, bring history back to life. Yes.
And they come a long ways with that, the museum there too. They've come a long ways because back in the early 90s, it wasn't as good as what it is now.
Right. I do give credit to the people that started the museum because they did collect and preserve a lot of history of the old timers and that days and pioneer families. And, if they hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have some of the things we have now.
Right.
True.
And actually, there was kind of a turn of events, and I can go into that later when we talk about the museum.
Yeah.
It kind of turned it around. But, they didn't have a lot of money or anything, and they put up what they could do. And, it looked kind of more like a secondhand store, originally. And I think Mike would agree since he's got, like a little section here and there, just kind of cluttered up. But, we redid it. Totally.
It was to give some exhibits for at the time that people were, coming during the Rail Fest times, just for them to see what was actually at the depot at the time, because they try to replicate what was back in the 30s, 40s, even probably 50s, or even early 1900s.
I mean, they did have this biplane that was in the middle of the museum that Walter Williams actually built and flew it around Paris.
Oh,
like in the 30s and stuff. So,
and that's an interesting thing. I'm glad Mike brought it up, since I'm not originally from Paris, I don't know all the history. So when I hear history like that, it's very interesting to me. So, there's two different names that you guys basically sort of use, or it's kind of used around Paris Depot and then Perris Valley Historical Museum. So you want to explain what the difference is so everyone else knows, what it's about?
Actually, our actual name is the Perris Valley Historical and Museum Association. That's our real legal name. But we also have a DBA as Perris Valley Historical Museum. And actually, the depot kind of started when we started having the art walk. And, most people in Paris, I'm hoping most people in Paris know about our depot.
Yes.
There's still a lot that don't. And so it was we started something called Depot After Dark. And then Greg Akery, who helps us a lot at the museum, and he's very good at organizing events. And he started the art walk. And he has music the last Friday of every month, and we always have a good crowd. And Paris loves us for it.
Yes.
So, sure do.
Yeah, we've attended a few of the events, and it's so nice, and it's good to feature indie artists, local artists. That's what we strive for. But we're not about doing live. So unfortunately, we can't do live right now, but in person live events. But what Greg is doing is amazing, and he's putting the word out, and he's so good doing it on social media too. So again, kudos to that. Yeah.
And growing up, I've always known the museum here or the depot as the depot, and or the annex depot. That's what I've always known it, and that's what it's always been told to me from when I was a real little kid, about 5 years old.
Yeah, that depot actually was one of the busiest depots around.
Yes.
Yes, it really was. And when I get into the railroad history, I'll tell you. Yeah.
And talking about that, so going back, we're going to go back. So we kind of went into the present day about the Perris Depot, the Art Walk. How about going back in time? Who were the earlier settlers?
Yeah, the earliest settlers, probably the Trujillos, who actually is kind of a legend that they discovered the Good Hope mine.
Oh.
And, we have some pictures of the Trujillo family, and Doroteo Trujillo was actually the father. And then his son Dario we have a picture of him holding like a big, huge rock, which is quartz.
Oh,
that's what the gold was inside the quartz, like in veins.
Oh.
Yeah.
And he was holding this rock, and that's a precious picture. And they had this stamp mill that used to crush the ore, and then they get the gold out of it. Yeah.
Wow.
But so those were very early. The Bernasconis that actually built the Southern Hotel. That was very early. They came. There's a whole great story about the Bernasconi family, but anyway, they had the Lakeview Hot Springs. Out in Lakeview, right off the Ramon Expressway, like across the street from the Lake Perris.
Yeah. Okay.
That was in the 1800s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
1880s.
I remember seeing pictures of that.
I think it was Mrs. Bernasconi, because she wanted her kids to come in to spare. She was an amazing woman, and she was the governess for one of the people up in San Francisco that was, a very high political person. And they were Swiss immigrants, her and her husband both. And Mr. Bernasconi actually went up and met her up in San Francisco.
Wow.
And then brought her down here after they got married to this little shack that she refused to live in.
I ain't living in there.
I mean, she actually cried. She did a story about it, and I think we have it on our board in the Bernasconi, exhibit up there at the museum.
Yeah.
But
wow,
it's interesting.
And
she raised a wonderful family.
That's the reason why it's called Bernasconi Road, going to
the
thing there.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's all in that little area right there.
Yeah, they actually had like a hot spring where people would come, like little cement. I used to call them like the cement ponds. Or something. It was a little cement, thing that they could get in with the hot water and stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a health spa in Paris, in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s.
Was a natural hot spring.
Yes, it was a natural hot spring.
I love hearing the stories of how, what the street names, what we know now is the street names, Bernasconi, then there's Good Hope, right? You said Good Hope?
Well, they kind of named that after the mine, I think.
The mine, yes.
Mine, but actually, besides the Trujillos and the Bernasconis, there were the Mapes family.
Yeah.
And we have Mapes Road.
Yes, Mapes Road.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we had the Hook family, which really built up the town with a lot of businesses for 100 years.
Yeah.
And we had the Aiken family, which I was very close with. One of the daughters, the youngest daughter, she outlived her whole family. And my sisters and I took care of her when she got older. And I was actually with her when she died at Sun City Gardens at 99. Yeah.
99.
Wow.
And her dad actually had the very first library. Henry Aiken had the very first library in the Riverside County.
Oh, wow.
In Paris.
Wow.
I remember that little library that they had here.
Yeah, but it wasn't that library, but he worked in the mines too, and he got hurt. But they came out originally, the Aikens came out and settled on the corner of Newport Road and Murrieta Road. At that time you could get a section of land, and I believe they had 160 acres, which was like a quarter section. But, they tried farming and stuff, and they really had, because they always relied on Mother Nature. If they didn't get the rain, their crop would fail. But he had, a couple of years, I think they didn't do too well, and he ended up working at the mine, and then he got hurt, and then they came into Paris and built a house right on 4th Street.
Wow, right over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, on 4th Street. Yeah, right where the high school is. The the high school building,
Yeah.
the district building.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh, okay. Right there.
Yeah,
Oh,
right there.
Dang. So now talking about the early settlers, what did they do for a living? You
Okay.
talked a lot about the different families, the founding families.
Yeah,
You
I
wanna tell
mean,
me?
there was a lot more. I mean, there was the Mr. Nance who actually came to Paris because of his health.
Hmm.
A lot of people came to this valley because of their health. They were from the Midwest, well, kind of the Iowa, that area. And they came out because they had asthma or something, and they would come out to a drier climate.
Mm.
And Mr. Nance was one of those people, and he actually prospered as a farmer. And then he decided, he helped the town grow, and he was part of the first Perris Valley Bank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he also owned an interest in the brick factory, which was amazing because when they got water from the Big Bear, Reservoir project that was built in those days, and that was about 1890, the Perris Brick Company sold them 1 million bricks to build that.
Wow.
Ooh, wow.
So we have a picture of the workers there, and you can see there's bricks all over the place.
Wow.
And that was really on the corner of like 2nd Street and Paris Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
My goodness.
I think the cement plant's there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then, we had and then Mr. Nance also built a beautiful building right in front of the depot.
Okay.
It's still there, but it was a beautiful building, and it had all kinds of stores in it, and even the post office, and it actually burnt down. He built it in 1895, and it burnt down in 1905.
Wow.
And after that, they used it kind of as a warehouse for grain and stuff because the depot was right there, and they could ship their grain out.
Oh, right over there. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And we had, the Beatties, which Frank Beatty was quite a man, and he worked at the Good Hope Mine. He was almost like an engineer. He could do anything, and he would find water, dig wells. I have pictures of him at the Good Hope Mine. I have pictures of him with a huge hay baler, a steam hay baler that is like had a crew of about 10 people just trying to bale hay in those days.
Wow.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were a big part. And, later, the Evans family came in the 1880s. The Mora family actually came in 1908, and they had 8 children. So we had a huge population of Moras, and they were wonderful people. I knew lots of them, even went to school with several. And we had the Martin family, which it was Martin Road until it turned into the Ramona Expressway.
Oh.
So I knew
Yes.
the Martin family, and then the Caduras family and the Motts, came in and farmed, and mostly they started out with sheep.
Oh.
Yeah, and they were turned into farmers and bought up land, and were very instrumental in the farming. Had a lot of crops. And then we had the Woodward. They had like a little farm out towards Good Hope, and they were instrumental in having a big well in Paris when they finally found water, because the Big Bear water kind of faded out because they had too many people in front of them, like Redland Citrus and into Merino Valley. And then by the time it got Paris, it only came to Paris maybe for 2 or 3 years. So
Wow.
Too many people tap into it.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
want their water.
yeah. And
Yep.
so, luckily we had a lot of artesian wells under the ground. They didn't know, but then the mechanical age came, and they were able to do pumps and stuff, and found all this water. So we had an abundant source of water. So anyway, so it really was, farming, which was a lot of dry farming. And when they were getting the water from the Big Bear Dam, they actually had a lot of fruit trees out in North Paris area. And when the water ran out, a lot of those people had beautiful Victorian houses. They moved them to Riverside, and some of them are still in Riverside.
Yeah, and downtown area, right? Yeah,
Yes.
I love those houses.
Yeah.
Those are so beautiful.
So
Yeah.
Can you imagine moving one of those houses
Yeah.
even back then?
Well, they would use like horses, put
Oh.
it, I've seen pictures of it. So it's pretty interesting, but,
Oh.
they thought they weren't ever going to have any water, if they would have just waited.
Yeah.
You could have waited it out and gotten the water from underneath the ground. It would have been successful for
Sure
them.
would have been.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we're working on a farming exhibit for the rods and rails, because we had potato families for a long time, which that was a huge crop in Paris, like in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And And, before that, they had grain. Then when they found water, they had alfalfa because alfalfa needs a lot of water.
Mm-hmm.
And they had beautiful alfalfa crops, and they had an alfalfa festival. And I'll show you some pictures of that. But anyway, that's mostly what they did. In the beginning, they had miners, they had, farming. And then, people did build up things in the town where they had stores like the Hook family and the Mapes family. And even Mr. Mapes was even the mailman. He used to take a horse and ride all around delivering the mail.
Wow.
We have his saddle in the museum. Mr. Mapes.
Wow.
And one of the old sorting, board tables.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and they used to. I believe you guys still have that in there too for the telegrams when the telegrams used to come in.
The teletype, the Morse code.
Morse code.
Yeah, the Morse code.
Yes.
Yeah, we have the Morse code machine.
Oh yeah, because did they actually do a lot of messaging that way?
I think they did. Yeah.
And then
The kids when they come in, they're so fascinated with it. We let them hit the buttons and everything. Yeah. So, we do have interesting things in there they can do.
Isn't it amazing how technology guides us through? You think Morse code, the machines is just for back then sending SOS. That's, I think, what Young People's Society would know that for SOS, but it's really to communicate across, the land like that. And then it comes to the telephone, wires, technology, and then now cell phone, landlines, then cell phones, wireless. And then now, instead of using a little tapping machine, we got the cell phone now, we can communicate. But it's important that kids know the history.
Yeah, and they love it.
Yeah.
They really do. They're fascinated by it.
Yeah.
So I think our museum does a lot of teaching, the history. And we have an old scale inside the depot that was original where they would, maybe weigh the sacks that would be going on the train or coming back on the train. And there's a few little spots that they didn't cover up when they restored the depot of the names of the people that would receive shipments. And so they would place their products there and they would come and pick them up.
Wow.
Yeah, and that telegram was the instant messaging back then.
Yes.
That's what we should liken it to the kids when they're hearing, that's what they talk about.
Well, I think was probably faster than snail mail.
Because you just have to listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? the communication really wasn't very good.
No.
Now everything's instantaneous, and we think, hurry up and answer me.
To decipher what's coming in too. That was because it's all just beeps.
Yeah, and if the beeps cut out or something, you could be saying one word or you mean this letter A, but then it cut out, so you think it's like E or F or something, and the message doesn't come through.
But everybody else that's all in the area could actually hear that message coming through too.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Is that how that works, or is that
if they're on the frequency?
Yeah, frequency. Yes.
So
yes.
I don't know that too many probably were in those days, but I know when the telephones came in, people used to listen on people's party lines.
The lines get crossed and stuff. Yeah, the operator messes
kids
up.
don't even realize. Oh, you had a party line.
Yeah,
three or four people on it.
That's right.
Oh, somebody's on the line. You can't use the phone.
I remember that back in the days. That's early.
Yeah.
So now we talked a little bit about the railroad. You want to tell me the importance of the railroad coming to Perris?
Yeah, originally Perris was on the route to of the Transcontinental Route, like from New York to San Diego, and unfortunately, the Temecula Gorge washed out. It's kind of south of Temecula. And, after 2 or 3 washouts, the railroad actually abandoned the tracks because it caused too much damage to the rail. They had bridges and stuff over it, but they broke and trains got derailed. And so now the route is along the coast. They have the trains that run along the coast. But actually, the train would come to Perris, and then they would go around to Lake Elsinore, and then they would go to Murrieta, and then it would go down to Temecula. And so they kept those lines open, for quite a few years, and it finally closed down in the 1930s when Railroad Canyon, do you remember Railroad Canyon Lake or anything? It turned into Canyon Lake.
Yeah.
Well, the tracks there used to flood along the San Jacinto River, south of Perris. And they had to abandon those
Wow.
at that time.
Yeah, I faintly remember that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, then Perris actually still had a line that went to San Jacinto. You know, they would go through Perris and go in through Hemet and then to San Jacinto because there was a lot of farming there, and they would, you know, pick up their grain or potatoes or whatever. And now they've even kind of abandoned some of that. I mean, it still will go to Roma land, but it doesn't go further than that.
True. Yeah, true.
Yeah. I mean, during the heyday of the potatoes, I mean, there was one of the guys that I knew, I used to actually babysit his kids. It was, yeah, Mr. Higginson, John Higginson. And he said he used to almost sleep at the depot because there were so many trains going out with potatoes, and they would go all over the United States. They'd even get sent, you know, to the government for the soldiers.
Oh, wow.
And actually Perris, some of the potatoes, because they grew mainly like white rose potatoes that are kind of thin skinned and whatnot, but they're really delicious. They're, you know, if you mash them up and stuff, they're real fluffy and nice. But they were sold to Laura Scudder's potato chips.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So yeah, I actually, I was involved in the potatoes. I even cut potatoes to plant, like for seed. I worked at the potato shed. I used to grade potatoes. You know, you'd have to throw out the big ones for bakers and the small ones to be the peewees. You know, it would go into a different slot on the grading machine. And yeah, then I worked in the office. You know, when I was probably a senior in high school, I worked in the office. So I kind of did a little bit of everything when it came to potatoes.
I know Mike and I have some stories about potatoes, but we'll have to talk off the air to get. I know Mike is really interested. He's like on the edge of his seat, like, we got to talk about potatoes.
Well, I mean, that was a huge industry in
Yeah,
Paris.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
a lot of people came from out of town. You know, they would
Yeah.
travel the crops. And we had a summer crop, which was huge, and a winter crop. So they had two crops of potatoes. And, you know, it wasn't until about the 70s, you know, the late 60s, the 70s, that water got so expensive and, you know, it just wasn't profitable enough to grow potatoes unless you had, I think Agra Empire in San Jacinto still grows potatoes out here.
Oh,
Few fields once in a while.
Man, I wish
Wow.
Paris would dedicate so much land just for farming crops and all. I wish it would, but we
Yeah.
haven't done any
I
of that
mean,
yet.
you know,
since-
all the big farmers are mostly passed away now. And,
yeah.
you know, they actually sold their lands, you know, because that's what kind of gave them their retirement. That's what a lot of farmers had to do.
True, yeah, true.
And there is a lot of farming out in the Nuevo Lakeview area.
Yeah.
And of course, Menifee had mostly grain crops, you know, hay or grain, dry farming a lot out there. And Perris was lucky. They had like electricity in 1912. And I think Menifee didn't get it until the 1940s.
Wow.
Or 50s even, because even in their school,
Wow.
they had to use kerosene lamps.
All the way up until 1940s. Wow.
Even probably early 50s. But yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
That seems like it's
I
really
know.
late.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, Sun City came in the 1960s. And of course,
Mm.
and I mean, it was probably the south end of Menifee that didn't have as much
Wow.
utilities there until later, like mid-century almost.
Isn't that crazy? Wow.
We really take
Yeah.
electricity for granted, you know. That's just, it's amazing to me. It blows my mind to see and hear the history and how different cities progressed.
Right.
But really, Paris, it seems like Paris was ahead of their
Yeah.
time. Really was.
Yeah. I mean, they were,
Yeah.
well, they had the depot,
Yeah.
which was a treasure. And of course, the depot sent out all the produce that the farmers built, you know, had, you know, and they also moved granite. We had some granite quarries.
Oh.
And I mean, even some of the granite built some of the big light posts and stuff around, even up to San Francisco. We got to
Wow.
San Francisco.
There's been a lot of money here in Paris.
A lot of
For-
grave markers were
Yeah.
built with that granite. You know, it was a big business.
Wow. It's amazing to hear the history behind all the different produce, the different raw materials that came out, and how important the railroad tracks are to distribute that, because now we distribute with trucks and Big Mac trucks and
Right.
things like that. But back then it was all about using the railroads and
Yes.
trains and stuff
Yes.
to send it out. Yeah.
There was a big granite mine actually out by Cahalico Road.
Oh,
north of Paris. In fact, we helped a gentleman, Steve Stenlake, and I helped a gentleman find out a lot of history about it. And
wow.
went to some of the people I went to school with and talked to them, and they grew up out there. And actually, they told me a lot of those big boulders out of that mine went down to the beach for a break. Along the coast, which I didn't know until I did that research. So it was interesting. So yeah, Perris had a lot of good stuff.
That's awesome. And when did the Perris Valley Historical Museum, when was that founded? And why is it so important? You're already touching on so many history aspects of it, but explain to me why the museum is so important.
Well, we actually were founded in 1964. So we're an older museum, and it was founded by some people that, there were pioneer families, the Cannells, and who were part of the Trujillo family, actually. And, there were several people that, like I said, gathered up the artifacts and different things from the families that we still have today. And we had a really good board, actually. Robert Warren Jr., who had his dad started the People's Store.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Like in 1939. And his son actually was the mayor of Paris at the time.
Oh.
Yeah. And he was one of the ones that started the museum. And actually, Clarence Muse, if you remember who he was.
Yes, he was one of the founding fathers, right?
Well, he actually was one of the first members of the Perris Valley Historical Museum.
Oh, and he was an actor, African-American actor, right?
Yes, he was.
That's who the Muse, City of Paris names the program after.
Muse,
And then there's a Muse Center there.
And so, and then there was Leonard Kirkpatrick, who actually was from Menifee, was on our board, and OK Young, who was like an oil distributor, and Mildred Martin, who was the city clerk of Paris for about 20 years, like in the 40s and 50s. And she was from the Dunsmore family, and they were early settlers too, and they lived right not too far from you, like along 11th Street up towards the hill.
Oh, okay.
On Witt Street, they had a big orange grove and stuff there.
Didn't the Kirkpatricks have their first, I guess you could say, store before Stater Brothers came in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it wasn't the Kirkpatrick that had the store. There was other Kirkpatricks in Paris too. But Leonard Kirkpatrick was very prevalent. I mean, he was on the school board and different things because Menifee was part of the Paris Union High School District, and he was, he helped put together a lot of brochures, and he had a lot of photos and stuff.
Wow.
And he was a great gentleman. And Mr. Shockey, I don't know, did you ever know Ted Shockey?
No.
He was like really into Boy Scouts and stuff. I mean, the first time I ever got to go to the beach, I was friends with one of their daughters. They had foster children, and I got to go to the beach first time, and I was probably about 10 years old.
Oh,
wow. With the Shockeys, and I mean, they were such a wonderful family.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing. And tell me, what is one of your best memories that you have growing up here in Paris? You already went through so many of your past knowledge that you have, but what's really special to you?
What was special to me, because my parents immigrated from Ireland, actually, and they came to Paris because they had an Uncle John Brosnan, who was a carpenter in Paris, and he built a few of those little white houses that had the little wooden, siding on them and stuff. I think there still might be one or two left around, but they came because it was 1931, and that's when the Depression was raging, and my mother actually was in Chicago, and my dad, they grew up in Ireland together and were actually sweethearts, and they separated, and he went to New Zealand actually and worked, and then came through San Francisco and met my mother in Chicago, and they got married and came out to Paris.
Wow.
So they knew each other in Ireland?
They went to school together,
Oh, and then they separated somehow geographically, and then
my dad went to New Zealand.
Yes.
And my mother went to, through New York, and went to Chicago and was an Irish maid.
Oh my gosh.
For a Jewish family in Chicago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're really sewn into the fabric of what Paris is. So many of the founding families personally, and you have so many awesome stories. I love hearing that. And Katie, you brought 2 books. You want to tell me about this. This is the Images of America at Perris Valley. I wish we could show, maybe we'll take some pictures, but this is an actual book that you guys published.
Well,
wow.
The first one we did was when we had to move out of the depot because it actually got restored.
Yes.
Wow.
Our museum had, gone to council meetings and met with people that were supportive of it. And at the time, the Orange Empire actually owned the depot because it was given to them by the Santa Fe Railroad when the depot kind of stopped shipping produce and stuff out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Orange Empire had it, and they were trying to raise money to restore it, but I think they had about $200,000.
Wow.
Which wasn't really enough.
No, not at all.
And so actually the city at the time, they felt the depot was worth being saved and everything. They put $1.5 million in it.
Ooh, man. Yes. I'm glad they did.
I know, me too. And so it, we got our treasure back.
Yeah, it's a full landmark now, which, that's a whole historic landmark.
I mean, there's not too many depots that have the beauty that one does.
That's
and
right.
It was put back. We had Dave Stewart at the time. He was helping the Orange Empire Railway Museum because he came to Perris because his wife was a Perris, was one of did the parachutes.
Oh, parachutes.
Yeah, we met Dave Stewart. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And there was different Dave Stewarts in Perris.
Sure.
So our Dave Stewart, and I love the other one too, because he did just in Paris and stuff.
Oh, that's the one.
But,
yes.
You probably knew him, but Dave Stewart was he was the superintendent or in charge of the depot restoration.
Oh.
And he actually graduated from MIT and worked for NASA.
Wow.
So, I mean, he was a perfect person. I mean, so every piece of that depot got done the right way.
Wow, I'm sure, especially coming from MIT.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he, he's just a wonderful person. He kind of doesn't like to get in the limelight too much, but
True.
We love him. And
so I'm looking at this book here. This is the second book. So Images of America at Perris Valley. I'll just read a quick little synopsis here. So the brave pioneers who arrived throughout the late 1800s in covered wagons and or on trains to the desolate San Jacinto Plains, as it was called at the time, saw beauty in the picturesque mountain ranges and blue skies, were beholden to their new home in what was to become Perris Valley. Ready to start their new lives, many came for health benefits provided by the dry climate. The Perris Valley had come a long way from its rural farming roots. It is now highly diversified and urbanized. Several exciting venues are part of Perris Valley today, including the Orange Empire Railway Museum, which is now the largest rail museum in the western United States, and the internationally renowned Skydive Perris. The Perris Valley Historical and Museum Association, with author Katie Keyes, a lifelong native of Perris Valley, has worked diligently to put together a book that shows the history of the Perris Valley in an educational and an adventurous way for our readers to enjoy. The Perris Valley Historical and Museum Association was established in 1964. It is a volunteer organization comprised of several very dedicated people who have a passion for their history. The Images of America series celebrates the history of neighborhoods, towns, and cities across the country. Using archival photographs, each title presents the distinctive stories from the past that shape the character of the community today. Arcadia is proud to play a part of the preservation of the local heritage, making history available to all. So now this book, Images of America, Perris Valley, is available
at the museum.
At the museum
I think
for sale.
Actually, we would like them to purchase them at the museum because we get the whole amount. If they purchase them online, we only get like a small tidbit.
Yes.
True.
And then the second one is
the first one that we did is when they were redoing the depot, and it was closed for like about 4 years or so. So when we told the city that we were thinking of doing a book, which I was thinking we would do it for the centennial. Well, Michael McDermott, who was the redevelopment agency, the head of the redevelopment agency, he said, "Oh, do it right now, and we can promote Perris with it."
Yeah.
And so it was a also another project of love for the city, and several of us got together and put that together. Each one of us kind of did a section. I did the farming and the water, because that's the things I knew. Well, I knew everything probably, but that was something I could get the information for easily. So anyway, it was a combination of a lot of passion and love for the city of Perris.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And do you want to tell me about this? So this is the first book, right? The big book that,
so it was kind of a coffee table book, we called it.
Yeah. So you want to tell me about this one, Perris, A Place to Remember?
Right. It goes, from the very beginning with the origins of, the Native Americans. And it tells about the Rimrock Reserve, which is one of the really a prized possession in Perris too. But the Mott family, who bought the property from the Penny Ranch, which was actually well known in the archaeological circles,
Oh,
because they had a lot of pictographs and different things of the Native American ceremonies and stuff. And actually, Audie and Charlie Mott bought that property in probably the late 50s. And, they realized they had a treasure up there on their property, and they donated several hundred acres to the University of California Reserve System.
Yeah.
And so, now it's maintained by the University of California.
That's nice.
And people can still go on a tour, but you have to go through the university to do that. But, it's one of probably the best reserve spots, for that type of thing in the Western United States too.
That's awesome. So I'll read a little snippet. This is the introduction part at the Perris, A Place to Remember. This is out of the book here. While taking longtime residents on a trip down memory lane, the authors hope this book will introduce our new citizens to a valley filled with history. This is by no means a complete history of Perris. It is intended to trigger old memories and make other readers want to learn more about the valley. If this book is successful, it will make readers exclaim, "I didn't know that." I already said that a lot of times.
I've said that sometimes too.
It is our hope that readers will be left with a deeper appreciation of our community, for Perris is a place to remember and one with exceptional opportunities for future possibilities. And was this actually a collaboration with the city of Perris? Because I see their emblem here.
Well, they paid for it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing.
So we had like 1,000 copies made, and they paid the
Oh,
bill. So we had
wow.
to split the books with them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we got so many and they got so many. And so it was a moneymaker for us. And each copy that we sold, we put in our endowment fund,
Oh, there you go.
to
Nice.
build it up, and
Good.
Nice. So this is a limited edition book.
pretty much.
Yes.
It's only 1,000 copies made
Yeah.
of that one.
Absolutely. So what it says here in the book from City of Perris, it looks like, discover the Perris you never knew on the pages of this pictorial history. The city will come alive through photographs and stories from the past. An adventure of historic proportions awaits you. That is amazing.
We actually sold all of our books that the city had given us, but when Michael McDermott left the city of Perris, he found a couple of boxes
Wow.
hidden away, and so he gave them to us. So we still have a few copies left.
Nice. So
Nice.
both of these books can be purchased at the museum physically here
I
in
believe
Perris.
so.
Yes. I love that, Katie. And I'm glad that you brought these in. That we'll take some pictures if you don't mind, so we can share that on social media. And talking about on social media, so find the Perris Valley Historical Museum on social media on Facebook under Perris Valley Historical Museum. And on Instagram, they are as Perris Depot. So Perris Depot, DEPOT. And also find them online at PerrisValleyHistoricalMuseum.com. And if you get a chance, folks, go to the museum, do a tour, because we've done a few tours, and
Yes.
it's very educational. It's
It
nice and
is.
cool in there too,
Yeah,
which
it
we
is very
appreciate.
nice, yeah.
Saturday and Sunday we're open now from 12 to 4.
Okay,
Well,
good.
yeah.
And is there a fee to get in? How much is that?
It's free, but we do accept donations.
Yes,
yes,
because you guys are a nonprofit organization.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. I've done the tours a few times. I enjoyed it, and it's awesome to feel the history and to actually see in person firsthand what the architecture and all the artifacts are like, because you can see that, when you look at it in pictures and stuff, you don't get the vibes from it, what the kids nowadays, the vibes, the feeling. But you get to see how big the artifacts are. And it wasn't very big. That's the thing. People back then were a little bit smaller, a little shorter. So the desks, I remember seeing the desks for the kids were really small. Nowadays it'd be, like 2-3 times as big. And the shoes and stuff, the dresses, people, what they wear, the clothes back then. So that was very interesting. Definitely go check it out.
Plus all the artifacts that they use for farming and whatnot.
Yes.
All of that. So that's original stuff that was found here.
Yeah.
And that was actually used by the old farmer from way back when.
Yeah.
And we have stuff from the gold mine. And we have also Fred Perris's family gave us quite a few things that belong to him. And we have his anvil and his, we have some tools from his blacksmith shop.
Wow. I do remember seeing that, the anvil. Yes. That's
nice.
Awesome. And there's a huge horse and carriage right in the center of the museum.
It's Fred Perris's survey wagon.
Oh.
One of them. And there's a good story about that too, because it originally ended up in Knott's Berry Farm. Yeah. And so they actually gave it back to the museum.
Wow.
I didn't ever hear the story of how it got to Knott's Berry Farm, but I was happy they gave it back.
Yeah, of course.
And actually, it wasn't in the best shape because, it was out in the hills and rocky terrain and all that. And actually, thank goodness for the county of Riverside and Marion Ashley, this is supervisor of our area at the time, and he was able to get us $25,000 to restore that.
That's amazing.
So, we had it restored by a professional, and did a great job.
Yeah, they did. That's awesome.
They did. Yeah.
So definitely go check them out. Find them on social media. If you're in the area, even Inland Empire, and you're into history, which is a beautiful thing to know about, go check it out. Go to the museum and be educated about the history of the area here. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate
you for having me.
Yeah. So this is Katie Keys. She is the president of the Perris Valley Historical Museum. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Mike and Phoebe Show on Alternative Twist Radio. If you missed any past episodes, just search the Mike and Phoebe Show or Alternative Twist Radio on any major podcast app.